We're going to start off today with opening up a hearing on HB 2332, and Mike will give us a rundown on that.
Mike Heim with the Revisor of Statutes Office. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this bill is a simple bill. The seal affixed to the front of the podium in the chamber of the House of Representatives on the effective date of this act is hereby established as a seal of the House of Representatives. The bill describes what the seal entails and then provides a seal shall be kept in the office of the Speaker and used for the attestation of official documents of the House of Representatives and for other purposes approved by the Speaker. That's the bill.
Committee, are there any questions for Mike? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mike. First up on a long list of people wanting to speak on this, Chair Estes, welcome to committee.
Thank you very much. I promised you this would be the shortest testimony ever. So here we go. One day I noticed that I was reviewing seals, and I noticed that the House had never adopted one. Of course, the governor has a seal, the state has a seal, and many other departments have, or entities within government have a seal. And we have one on our floor, and we never codified it into law. So that's all that I am seeking to do today. I did realize there's one thing I left out of the bill that I've ordered an amendment for, and that seal be able to be used by all members of the House and only members of the House. I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Included in that amendment, kind of like the governor's seal resides in the governor's office, is this going to reside under the control of the Speaker as well? Or?
The existing language has it residing in the Speaker's office.
Thank you. Representative Clayton?
So I have a question. When I first started in 2012 or in 2013, I saw that seal everywhere. People had individual ones in their office. Then I went to ALEC this summer and I saw that there was a place that had a booth that was creating several different similar seals for states. So can you tell me a little bit more about the design, the origin of it, and who designed it and where it came from?
My understanding is that at some point, a representative, and I think it was Representative Hutton.
It was.
Made the beautiful podium, and he must have gotten that seal. And that's what, since it's one that we use, that's what I followed as a good inspiration.
Okay, you know, I'm not averse to supporting this, but if we could get some material as to where that came from. I mean, I can do the research myself, but I think it seems better coming from you. But if the committee could have that before we vote, I'd be really grateful for that, because I just want to know who designed it, because that does matter. It needs to be local to Kansas, and this, I used to think that it was until I went to ALEC and saw that it's not, it's a company.
I'll be happy to see what I can find out. Thank you. And nonetheless, I would say it could be argued that it's a Kansas design. The heart of the seal is very typically, you know, I can see it here on our flag, and many of our departments take this same thing and just change the names around it. So I know this company that you're talking about, and I think they kind of take other states' seals and do whatever they do. But I think long before that, we were doing the same thing.
Representative Reese?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you this morning. You said that that seal could be used by the representatives. Is that just while in office or in perpetuity?
I'd leave that to the will of the committee. I think in terms of official letterhead or whatever, I think I'm probably more comfortable with that being sitting members. But I think at some point you might design your own coffee mug and have it at your house, and I hope you can take it with you when you go.
And I've got one of those seals in my office that I got.
Do you? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Committee, any more questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Chair Estes.
Thank you all. It was great to be here today.
Committee, I want to back up just for a minute here. I kind of skipped over bill introductions. As an exempt committee, we still are taking bill introductions. Do we have any introductions this morning? Yes, sir. Come on up. Minority Leader, welcome to committee.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I had 3 years on this committee, and I miss you all very much. Mr. Chair, if the committee and you all will accept it, I have 25 RS 1785, which modernizes the Kansas Act Against Discrimination to include sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or status as a veteran.
Committee, are there any questions? Any objections? Consider it accepted.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And welcome back. Moving on, we're going to have a quick hearing on SB 13, and Mike will get us up to speed on that one.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this bill deals with filings in the Secretary of State's office. The bill would provide business agents of labor organizations would no longer be required to file the entity's constitution, bylaws, and annual reports. The State Board of Regents would no longer be required to file reciprocal agreements with other educational institutions from other states. Secretary of Revenue would no longer be required to file annual reports related to tax abatements for motor carriers. And the director of the Kansas Water Office would not be required to file copies of easements that they've entered into. And finally, bonded warehousemen would no longer be required to be licensed or file these licenses with the Secretary of State. I can answer questions if you want. You've got the representative of the Secretary of State's office. It's going to be much more eloquent than I am on this bill.
Committee, any questions for Mike? Not seeing any. Thank you, sir. First up to talk will be Clay Barker. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clay Barker, General Counsel for the Kansas Secretary of State. This bill, SB 13, is Secretary Schwab's top legislative priority for the year, and it's surprising it's not an election bill, and I'll explain why. But the Secretary of State's office is a little bit like sometimes the drawer in your kitchen, where if you don't know where things go, it ends up in that drawer, and we have a vast number of topics where we have a little bit of involvement, everything from elections and business filings, but also cemetery and mortuary home, unions, rivers, publications. So we have a wide variety of things. And what this bill does is it amends 12 statutes and completely repeals 11. And the commonality is their filings with our office that don't serve any purpose anymore. Maybe they did in the past, they're legacy filings. No one ever asked to see this information. We just have to process it, and somebody else has to give it to us. And we've talked to the corresponding party at the other end of each of these filings, and nobody sees a reason for these filings to continue. The reason it's the top priority for the Secretary is, there's 3 reasons, but it would save our office for just 1 year, 400 hours of IT programming time that if these filings are continued in statute, we'd have to program to be able to take and file them in our databases. And that would be able to allow us to move other things up the priority list for software programming. Second reason, it would save our staff about 50 hours a year going forwards of time spent filing and processing these various filings that we wouldn't have to do, and then the other corresponding entity would also save time. And last, we wanted to serve as a leader for other agencies in state government, and I'll read you a quick quote. I remember this from about 10 years ago. Mitch Daniels, former governor of Indiana, said, "You can't carve fat out of government the way you can carve fat off a steak. It's more like marbled meat. This fat is spread all through it." And we consider all these little filings, none of which are that big, to be part of that inefficiency in government. And this is the kind of thing that a middle manager in a company could get rid of on their own, and agencies, I hope, do a fairly good job of keeping themselves efficient. But when a statute says you must do this, they have to do it, even though it doesn't make sense. And sometimes the agencies look and say it's just not worth the effort of getting a bill drafted and getting it to a committee and trying to get a hearing, trying to get it worked, hope it gets above the line, go to the other chamber, and then hope it doesn't end up on the floor, the cutting room floor at a conference committee. And so they just suffer with these small inefficiencies. They're not large, they're not going to cause big changes in the budget. And we were hoping by putting this bill together, we can serve as an example to others that the legislature will take up these inefficiencies and get rid of them. And now I'll go through the different filings, and the revisor mentioned them. And again, none of these are that large. The first, reciprocal university agreements. Anytime a university in Kansas makes an arrangement with a university outside the state, or more commonly outside the country, the Board of Regents, the governor, several entities have to get involved. A copy of that agreement is at the Board of Regents, at both schools. That's where the students go to get it, but we also get a copy. And it's kind of interesting to see where these schools are, but we do nothing except file it, wait for a while, and send it off to the archives. No one ever looks at it. Second type is a series of different tax abatement lists. The Department of Revenue will send us a big spreadsheet with a cover letter once a year saying, here are all the abatements we gave this year. Again, no one ever comes to us, asks to see it, or looks at it. It's at the Department of Revenue. And the third type there are riverbank easements. Anytime on the 3 navigable rivers in Kansas, the Missouri, Kansas, and Arkansas, if the state grants an easement, we get a copy of it, even though it's also filed at the county Register of Deeds and with the Water Office. And the reason those types of filings are there, just a quick bit of history, is in pre-internet days, the Secretary of State's office was here in the Capitol on the 2nd floor. And when the legislature felt a report needed to be readily available to the public, they'd give it to the Secretary of State, and people could walk in and ask to see it, and if they paid, we could copy it for them. The office has now moved out of the Capitol, and with the internet, no one thinks of going to the Secretary of State for these things. You go to the issuing office, and that office will have a copy of all this, so no one ever looks at these reports. Okay, the last two. First are bonded warehouses. So in 1927, the state created a law that if you wanted to advertise a warehouse as a bonded warehouse, you had to go to the state, show proof of bond, and get a license. And I didn't quite understand why the state did that until I found an old file from the 1980s in our office that said back then, if your personal property was stored in a state bonded warehouse, you didn't pay personal property tax. So it made sense for these warehouses to get that title of a bonded warehouse. Then there used to be about 500 or 600 bonded warehouses in Kansas. And in the 1980s, the tax code was changed and that exemption went away. The number of bonded warehouses went from about 500 to about 11 today. And when we called those last few and said, why do you keep licensing your warehouse with us? And they said, I don't know, we just always done it. And it's only $25. It isn't really worth the effort to question why they're still doing it. And we just want to eliminate this. The warehouses don't have to file with us. They don't have to get a license. They just operate as a warehouse. And if a customer wants to see if they have insurance, they can ask for it. It's just, again, a legacy that had momentum and no one thought of changing it. And the last category are union filings. And unions have been, since the 1940s, required to file an annual report with us and a constitution. But if they file with the federal government, they can use that in lieu of our filings. And everyone goes to the federal government for these. And actually, the only other proponent for this bill was the union organizations that just thought this was just a minor inconvenience for them, that they would no longer have to file these with our office. And again, no one ever looks for them in our office. They go to the federal government where it's easily accessible online. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll conclude my testimony, but I'll just sum up again. The idea of this was just to gather in one place, one bill, eliminating repealing a lot of filings that just don't make sense and are just busy work for our office and for the customers that have to file with us. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for Clay? Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barker, I am curious, so did the groups come to you, or this was an internal thing that you folks did? I mean, what was kind of the red flag that you were able to identify all of these? And are there some more in the cooker that you have coming, or is this kind of your whole list?
Representative, created a spreadsheet. It's about 1,000 lines long of every statute that directs our agency to do something. And we just went through it and tried to flag the ones that didn't seem to make sense, and then did a historical investigation. Why is that law there? And talk to the entity on the other side and say, do you see a reason for this? And sometimes there was a reason, and we dropped it off. And I've had this list for a while. I think the IT programming is what put this over the line for us, that we needed to bring this to the legislature and package it all together in one bill. And that just happened to catch the, I guess, national momentum with DOGE and the Senate Efficiency Committee. This was the first bill in the Senate Efficiency Committee. I brought it in the first day, and they passed it. It got through the Senate 40-0.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here, Clay. So this information, even though it won't, if this bill passes, won't be in your office anymore, it will still be available somewhere.
Yes, Representative, correct. And that, again, is part of the motivation. This information is usually available at 2 or 3 other offices, which is where logically someone would go. If you're looking for an easement, you go to the Water Office or Register of Deeds. Nobody thinks to go to the Secretary of State. And if you had the time to flip through this bill, you'd notice a lot of times we're just lining out a phrase at the end of a sentence. It'll direct things and say, and file a copy with the Secretary of State. That's just repealed, that one line.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we don't have any written or no opponents, no neutral on this one. So I'd like to back up on the previous one. We had no written, no opponents, no neutral on the previous hearing that we heard too. So well, with that, we will close that section. Committee, Cheryl had emailed out our minutes over the last couple weeks here, so we have a few that we need to go over. What I would like to kind of go ahead and approve those minutes. Hopefully you guys have all had a time to look through those. But we have several kind of stacked up here. We have from February 6th, 11th, 13th, 14th, 17th, 25th, and 26th, and March 4th. Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve the slate of minutes as presented.
And Representative Schmo seconds. Committee, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion passes. Well, that does conclude our meeting today. Just a reminder, we will be having a meeting tomorrow. Be a little bit longer than this one. But anyway, anybody have anything, any news or comments for the good of the committee? Not seeing any at that. We're adjourned.